What if I told you that the person who hurt you the most was actually sent to save you? That every betrayal, every heartbreak, every moment of pain was perfectly orchestrated to unlock a power inside you that you never knew existed? I know that sounds impossible right now, especially if you're carrying around anger that feels like it's eating you alive. But stick with me for the next 30 minutes, because I'm about to share something that's going to shatter everything you think you know about forgiveness. Here's the thing that will blow your mind. There are people walking around right now who are completely free from resentment. People who have been betrayed, abandoned, and hurt in ways that would destroy most of us. Yet, they're living with more peace, joy, and success than people who've never experienced trauma at all. How is that possible? They discovered something called radical forgiveness. And it's not what you think. But before we unpack this life-changing concept, if you're ready to transform your relationship with pain and unlock your true power, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest insights on personal transformation and healing. I'm going to share with you exactly what radical forgiveness is, why traditional forgiveness keeps you stuck, and the specific steps you can use to transform any painful experience into a source of power. We're also going to look into the science behind why forgiveness actually changes your brain chemistry, how to forgive yourself for past mistakes without falling into guilt spirals, and why forgiveness meditation might be the missing piece in your healing journey. But first, let me tell you about something that's probably happening in your body right now. As I mentioned pain and betrayal, your nervous system likely activated. Your shoulders might have tensed. Your breathing might have become shallow. That's because your brain doesn't distinguish between remembering trauma and experiencing it. Every time you replay that painful memory, you're literally re-traumatizing yourself. This is what most people don't understand about traditional forgiveness. When you try to forgive someone while still holding on to the story that you were wronged, you're fighting against your own nervous system. Your body is screaming danger while your mind is trying to say, it's okay. This internal conflict is exhausting, and it's why most forgiveness attempts fail. Traditional forgiveness operates from what we call the victim-perpetrator dynamic. There's the innocent victim, the guilty perpetrator, and the noble act of pardoning. But here's the problem with this model. It keeps you trapped in victim consciousness. You might say the words, I forgive you, but energetically, you're still carrying the wound. Radical forgiveness is completely different. It doesn't ask you to pardon anyone or pretend that harmful behavior was acceptable. Instead, it invites you to consider a radically different perspective. What if nothing that happened to you was actually wrong from your soul's point of view? Now, before your mind starts protesting, let me be clear about what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean that abuse is okay. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. It doesn't mean that you caused your trauma or that you deserved it. What it means is that your healing doesn't depend on the other person changing, apologizing, or being punished. This concept was pioneered by Colin Tipping in his groundbreaking work, The Power of Radical Forgiveness, and it's based on a profound shift in perception. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Radical forgiveness asks, how is this serving my soul's evolution? Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. I worked with a client who discovered her husband's affair after 20 years of marriage. Using traditional forgiveness, she might have said, what he did was wrong, but I choose to forgive him for the sake of our family. But she would still be carrying the energy of betrayal, still feeling like a victim of her husband's choices. With radical forgiveness, she began to ask different questions. How had this experience served her growth? What had she learned about herself? How had it redirected her life in ways that were ultimately beneficial? Through this process, she realized that the affair had forced her to confront issues in their relationship that she had been avoiding for years. It had also pushed her to develop a stronger sense of self and to pursue dreams she had put on hold. This doesn't mean the affair was good or that her husband's behavior was justified. It means that she was able to extract the gifts from the experience and use them to create a more authentic, fulfilling life. She moved from being a victim of her circumstances to being the hero of her own transformation story. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you truly understand radical forgiveness, you realize that the people who trigger your deepest wounds are often your greatest spiritual teachers. They're showing you exactly where you need to heal, grow, and evolve. From this perspective, your enemies become your allies in disguise. This is particularly powerful when it comes to childhood experiences that shaped your core beliefs about yourself and the world. Maybe you had a critical parent who never seemed satisfied with your achievements. Traditional therapy might help you understand how this affected your self-esteem and relationships. But radical forgiveness goes deeper. It asks, what was your soul trying to learn through this experience? Perhaps that critical parent was teaching you not to depend on external validation for your self-worth. Maybe they were showing you the importance of developing your own inner compass. Maybe they were helping you build resilience and independence. When you can see your most challenging relationships as perfectly designed curriculum for your soul's growth, everything changes. This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight, and it's not about forcing positive thinking onto painful experiences. It's about gradually opening to the possibility that there's a higher order to your life experiences, even the ones that felt random or cruel at the time. Let's talk about the neuroscience behind forgiveness, because understanding what happens in your brain makes the process much more tangible. When you hold on to resentment, your brain literally gets stuck in a loop. The neural pathways associated with that painful memory become strengthened through repetition, making it easier for your mind to default to those thoughts and feelings. This creates what neuroscientists call negativity bias amplification. Your brain becomes hypervigilant for signs of similar threats, which means you start seeing betrayal and hurt everywhere, even when it's not really there. You might find yourself suspicious of new partners because of what an ex did. You might struggle to trust friends because of past disappointments. Your unhealed wounds become the lens through which you see the world. But here's the exciting part. Neuroplasticity research shows that your brain can literally rewire itself at any age. When you practice radical forgiveness, you're creating new neural pathways associated with peace, empowerment, and wisdom. Over time, these new pathways become stronger than the old trauma pathways. This is why forgiveness meditation can be so powerful. It's not just a spiritual practice. It's a form of brain training. When you regularly practice shifting your perception of painful experiences from victimization to empowerment, you're literally changing the structure of your brain. And if you're finding this information valuable so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message of healing and transformation. Let me walk you through a specific radical forgiveness meditation technique that you can start using immediately. Unlike traditional forgiveness meditations that focus on sending love to those who hurt you, this practice focuses on transforming your own relationship to the experience. Begin by bringing to mind a situation that still triggers emotional charge for you. Don't start with your most traumatic experience. Choose something moderately challenging that you feel ready to work with. Notice what feelings arise in your body without trying to change them. Anger, hurt, disappointment, whatever is there is perfectly valid. Now, instead of trying to push those feelings away or immediately jump to forgiveness, ask yourself this question. What if my soul chose this experience for my highest good? Just sit with that possibility, without forcing any particular answer. Sometimes insights come immediately, and sometimes they unfold over days or weeks. Next, ask, what strengths have I developed because of this experience? Maybe you became more discerning in relationships. Maybe you learned to set better boundaries. Maybe you developed compassion for others who have been hurt in similar ways. Really look for the specific qualities that this challenge helped you cultivate. Then ask, how has this experience redirected my life in positive ways? Maybe that betrayal led you to a better relationship. Maybe that job loss pushed you toward your true calling. Maybe that health scare motivated you to prioritize what really matters. Look for the ways this painful experience became a catalyst for positive change. Finally, see if you can find genuine gratitude for the growth that came from this experience. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but for who you became because of how you chose to respond to it. This is often the most challenging step, but it's also the most liberating. The beautiful thing about this practice is that it works even if you don't fully believe it at first. You're not trying to convince yourself of anything or force positive feelings. You're simply opening to new possibilities and allowing your consciousness to expand beyond the victim story. Now let's address one of the biggest misconceptions about radical forgiveness. People often worry that if they stop being angry about what happened to them, they'll become naive or vulnerable to being hurt again. But the opposite is actually true. When you're no longer operating from wounded reactivity, you make much clearer, wiser decisions. Think about it this way. When you're carrying unhealed resentment, you're often making choices from a place of fear, anger, or the need to prove something. You might stay in unhealthy relationships because you're afraid of being alone. You might sabotage good opportunities because you don't feel worthy of success. You might push people away before they can hurt you. But when you've truly forgiven through the radical forgiveness process, you're making choices from a place of wisdom and self-love. You can set boundaries without resentment. You can say no to people and situations that don't serve you without carrying anger. You can open your heart to new love without being naive about red flags. This is particularly important when it comes to forgiving romantic partners. So many people struggle with how to forgive a spouse or partner for past hurts while still maintaining a healthy relationship. The key is understanding that forgiveness and accountability can coexist. You can radically forgive your partner for their affair while still requiring that they rebuild trust through consistent, transparent actions. You can forgive them for their addiction while still maintaining boundaries around what behaviors you'll accept in your relationship. Forgiveness doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It means releasing the emotional charge so you can respond wisely rather than react from wounds. When both partners understand radical forgiveness, it transforms the entire relationship dynamic. Instead of keeping score of past hurts, you're both committed to seeing every challenge as an opportunity for deeper love and understanding. Conflicts become conversations about growth rather than battles about who's right or wrong. But what about forgiving yourself for past mistakes? This is often even more challenging than forgiving others because you can't escape from yourself. Self-forgiveness through the radical forgiveness lens looks different from traditional approaches that often get stuck in guilt and shame cycles. Traditional self-forgiveness often sounds like, I made a terrible mistake, but I'm going to try to let it go and do better next time. But you're still carrying the energy of being a bad person who did something wrong. Radical self-forgiveness asks, how did this mistake serve my soul's evolution? What was I trying to learn? How did this experience contribute to who I am becoming? Maybe that lie you told taught you about the importance of authenticity. Maybe that time you hurt someone helped you develop empathy and compassion. Maybe that period of self-destructive behavior showed you what you truly value. When you can see your mistakes as part of your soul's curriculum rather than evidence of your inadequacy, self-forgiveness becomes natural. This doesn't mean you don't take responsibility for your actions or make amends when appropriate. It means you stop defining yourself by your worst moments and start seeing them as learning opportunities that contributed to your wisdom and compassion. One of the most powerful aspects of radical forgiveness is how it transforms your relationship with difficult people who are still in your life. Maybe it's a critical family member, a challenging coworker, or an ex-partner you share children with. Traditional approaches often focus on managing these relationships through boundaries and coping strategies. Radical forgiveness goes deeper. When you can see these difficult people as playing a perfect role in your spiritual development, your entire energy around them shifts. You stop taking their behavior personally because you understand that their actions are more about their own unconscious patterns than about you. This doesn't mean you don't protect yourself or that you allow toxic behavior, but you do it from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. You might choose to limit contact with a toxic family member, but you do it without carrying resentment in your heart. You might set firm boundaries with a difficult coworker, but you do it without making them your enemy. When you stop seeing people as obstacles to your happiness and start seeing them as teachers for your growth, everything changes. You become less triggered by their behavior because you're not expecting them to be different than they are. You can interact with them from a place of compassion rather than defensiveness. This shift is particularly powerful in family dynamics where you can't simply remove difficult people from your life. When you've radically forgiven a challenging family member, family gatherings become opportunities to practice your new level of consciousness rather than events you dread. Let's explore how radical forgiveness applies to some of the most challenging life experiences. Financial betrayals, for instance, can be devastating because they affect your sense of security and trust. Maybe someone embezzled from your business, destroyed your credit, or cost you your life savings through fraud or poor advice. A traditional approach focuses on legal remedies, getting restitution, and protecting yourself from future financial harm. These practical steps are important, but they don't address the emotional and energetic impact of the betrayal. You might get your money back, but still carry the wound of being violated. Radical forgiveness asks, what was this experience teaching you about money, trust, or your relationship with abundance? Maybe it showed you that your security doesn't come from external circumstances, but from your inner resourcefulness. Maybe it taught you to trust your own intuition about financial decisions rather than depending on others' advice. Maybe it redirected you toward a more authentic way of creating wealth. I worked with someone who lost everything in a business partnership betrayal. Through radical forgiveness, he realized that the experience had freed him from a business model that wasn't aligned with his values. It had also taught him about the importance of proper legal protections and due diligence. Most importantly, it had shown him that his identity and worth weren't tied to his net worth. Within 2 years, he had built a more successful business that was completely aligned with his authentic purpose. He often said that the betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to his career, even though it was initially devastating. Health challenges present another area where radical forgiveness can be transformative. Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, mental health struggles, or recovering from accidents or medical malpractice, radical forgiveness can be a crucial part of your healing process. This is perhaps the most sensitive application of radical forgiveness because it's important not to blame people for their health conditions or suggest that they created their illness. What radical forgiveness offers is a way to extract meaning and growth from health challenges rather than being consumed by victimhood or despair. When you ask how a health challenge might be serving your soul's evolution, you might discover that it's teaching you about self-compassion, slowing down, or prioritizing what really matters. Maybe it's developing your empathy for others who struggle. Maybe it's showing you the healing power of community and asking for help. Many people find that health challenges force them to develop a deeper relationship with their bodies, their emotions, and their spiritual life. Some discover their life's purpose through their healing journey. Others develop levels of presence and gratitude they never had when everything was going smoothly. The mind-body connection research is clear. Chronic stress and unresolved emotional trauma can contribute to physical health problems. When you release the emotional charge around your experiences through radical forgiveness, you're not just healing emotionally. You're creating optimal conditions for physical healing as well. Workplace conflicts and betrayals are another area where radical forgiveness can be incredibly practical. Whether you've been passed over for promotions, betrayed by colleagues, or subjected to toxic management, these experiences can create lasting career trauma that affects your performance and job satisfaction for years. Traditional approaches focus on documenting incidents, filing complaints, or finding new employment. Again, these practical steps may be necessary, but they don't address the energetic impact of workplace trauma. You might change jobs, but still carry the expectation of being treated unfairly or the belief that you can't trust workplace relationships. Radical forgiveness asks, What were these workplace challenges teaching you about your professional development? Maybe that toxic boss showed you the kind of leader you never want to become. Maybe being passed over for that promotion redirected you toward a career path that's more aligned with your authentic gifts. Maybe that workplace betrayal taught you about the importance of documenting agreements and protecting your professional interests. When you can extract the learning from workplace challenges, you stop carrying them into new professional situations. You become more discerning about workplace cultures without becoming cynical. You can advocate for yourself effectively without being defensive or aggressive. The practice of radical forgiveness also develops what we might call emotional immunity. Just as physical immunity helps your body resist disease, emotional immunity helps you resist being triggered by other people's unconscious behavior. You become less reactive to criticism, manipulation, or attempts to make you feel guilty or responsible for others' emotions. This doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected. In fact, the opposite is true. When you're no longer defending against potential emotional attacks, you can be more open, loving, and authentic in your relationships. You have more emotional energy available for connection because you're not constantly bracing for hurt. The ripple effects of practicing radical forgiveness extend far beyond your personal healing. When you stop carrying resentment and victim energy, you literally change the energetic field around you. People respond to you differently. You attract different opportunities and relationships. You model a different way of being for everyone you encounter. This is particularly powerful in breaking generational patterns of trauma and dysfunction. When you radically forgive your parents for their mistakes and limitations, you free not only yourself, but also future generations from carrying those ancestral wounds. Your children and grandchildren inherit your healing rather than your trauma. Many people notice that as they practice radical forgiveness, their relationships improve across the board. Old conflicts resolve naturally. Difficult people either change their behavior around you or naturally exit your life. New opportunities appear that align with your healed energy. This isn't magic. It's the natural result of no longer vibrating at the frequency of resentment and victimhood. When you're not expecting to be hurt or betrayed, you stop unconsciously attracting situations that confirm those expectations. When you're operating from empowerment rather than wounds, you make choices that lead to healthier outcomes. As we move toward the end of our time together, I want to address some common obstacles people encounter when practicing radical forgiveness. The biggest one is usually the fear that forgiveness means condoning harmful behavior or becoming vulnerable to being hurt again. Remember that radical forgiveness is about your internal relationship to experiences, not about your external boundaries or choices. You can forgive someone completely while still choosing not to have them in your life. You can release resentment while still requiring accountability. You can feel compassion for someone's unconscious behavior while still protecting yourself from its impact. Another common obstacle is the belief that your anger is protecting you or motivating necessary action. Sometimes people worry that if they let go of their resentment, they'll become complacent about injustice or stop advocating for themselves and others. But anger that comes from wounds is different from clear action that comes from wisdom. When you're operating from healed energy, you can take strong action against injustice without carrying the poison of resentment in your system. You can advocate powerfully for change without needing to demonize those who disagree with you. Some people also worry that radical forgiveness means they have to feel grateful for traumatic experiences or pretend that abuse was a good thing. This is not what radical forgiveness requires. You don't have to feel grateful for the experience itself, only for who you became through your response to it. The goal isn't to convince yourself that bad things are actually good. It's to extract maximum growth and wisdom from whatever you've experienced, so that your pain becomes meaningful rather than just senseless suffering. Let me leave you with a framework for implementing radical forgiveness in your daily life. Start small, with minor irritations and disappointments, rather than jumping into your deepest traumas. Practice asking, what might this experience be trying to teach me when you face challenges? Keep a forgiveness journal where you write about experiences that trigger you and explore how they might be serving your growth. Practice the forgiveness meditation I shared earlier on a regular basis, working with different situations over time. Remember that radical forgiveness is a practice, not a destination. You don't achieve it once and never have to work on it again. As you grow and evolve, new layers of old experiences might surface to be healed. New hurts might occur that need to be processed through this lens. But once you understand the principles of radical forgiveness, you have a tool that can transform any experience from a source of pain into a source of power. You have the ability to mine gold from every challenging experience and use it to create a life of greater freedom, joy, and authentic success. Your past doesn't have to define your future. Your pain doesn't have to become your prison. Your healing doesn't have to depend on anyone else's choices or actions. That's the radical promise of radical forgiveness, and it's available to you right now. The journey of forgiveness is ultimately a journey home to yourself. It's about remembering that you are not a victim of your circumstances, but the hero of your own story. It's about recognizing that every experience, even the most painful ones, has contributed to the unique, wise, compassionate person you are today. When you truly embody radical forgiveness, you don't just heal your own wounds, you become a source of healing for others. Your presence alone can remind people of their own power to transform pain into wisdom. Your example shows that it's possible to live with an open heart even after being hurt. This is perhaps the greatest gift of radical forgiveness. It doesn't just set you free, it contributes to the healing of our world. In a time when so many people are carrying ancient wounds and passing them to the next generation, your commitment to healing becomes a service to humanity. Every act of genuine forgiveness breaks a link in the chain of generational trauma. Every moment you choose empowerment over victimhood, you model a different possibility for everyone around you. Your personal transformation ripples out in ways you may never fully know, touching lives and healing hearts across the web of human connection. If this message resonated with you, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be transformed by discovering the power of radical forgiveness. And make sure to check out our other videos on healing and personal transformation. We discuss many more practical techniques for creating lasting change in every area of your life. So as you leave here today, remember that the power to transform any experience lies within you. The person who hurt you doesn't need to change for you to be free. The situation doesn't need to be different for you to find peace. Your liberation is entirely in your hands, and it always has been. That's the true power of radical forgiveness. It returns you to your own sovereignty, your own creative power, your own ability to write the story of your life from a place of wisdom rather than wounds. And that is perhaps the most radical act of all.